Hello and welcome back to the She is Courageous podcast. I want to talk today about a subject that is quite frankly critical for your business success, but more importantly for your well-being, your ability to be present fully in life and business. We are talking boundaries. Now I know that word can sometimes feel quite loaded. I've got so many clients who tell me they need to work on their boundaries. They know they put others' needs before themselves constantly, but what holds them back from setting boundaries, let alone keeping boundaries, is fear and worry. Fear of, forgive me, pissing people off, fear of missing out, but most of all, fear of being seen as selfish. And sometimes I do hear fear of not being able to actually stick to boundaries. So we go through what we perceive will be very painful to set boundaries, and then actually we're worried we're not going to be able to stick to them. But it's fear. It's fear. So we need to get really clear what boundaries are and what they are not, because they're not selfish. They're definitely not about pushing people away, shutting people out. Boundaries are about protecting what matters most, your energy, your time, your ability to, dare I say it, thrive, your ability to live the life that you dream of, that you desire, that you absolutely deserve. When you set boundaries, you are saying that you respect yourself enough to prioritise what you need. That's not cheesy. It's definitely not selfish, but it is courageous. And I know that. Now, the truth, as I've already said, the number one reason we struggle with boundaries is because we're afraid of how people will react. So all those fears of, will I annoy someone? Will I piss them off? Will they be upset with me? Will I be able to keep them? It's about how others will react. We're worried that people will think we're being difficult. We're worried that we'll upset other people. But the cost of not setting boundaries is so much higher. The cost of not setting boundaries is, if you want the worst case scenario, resentment, stretched so thin that you have nothing left to give, and worst case scenario, total burnout. So I want to talk about how you can shift the mindset and start setting your boundaries in a way that works for you. Because this isn't just about saying no, okay? And I've talked about saying no before on the podcast. I will undoubtedly talk about it again. Boundaries is not just about saying no. Boundaries are about creating clarity. And I've got the word balance in my mind, but actually I have a real challenge with the word balance, because I don't think we can get balance in life and business, because balance is equal measures on both sides. And actually the whole point of everyone that bangs on about finding balance in your life and business is actually you've got to find what works for you. So the word I've used in the past is harmony, okay? Boundaries are about creating clarity and creating the harmony that you desire for your life and your business, okay? Which might be balanced to you. Now, I think the other thing to remember when it comes to boundaries is boundaries aren't about controlling others. It's not about enforcing upon others, but they are about you taking control of your life. They're about you creating the space that you need for the success that you dream of. They're about creating the space you need to rest. They're about creating the space you need to focus on what really matters to you. Now, there is no doubt about it. This is the She is Courageous podcast. Setting boundaries takes courage. It really does, particularly if you don't have particularly strong boundaries right now. Setting boundaries takes practice, and it will feel uncomfortable. But every time you say no to something and yes to you, it will get easier. That's what I mean about practice. It will get easier. Every time you say no to something that doesn't serve you, you are saying yes to yourself, and that is what I want for you. So I want to just share with you some really simple tips for setting boundaries, okay? Because this is a massive subject, but I want to get us started. If you are already feeling like, oh, I need to sort my boundaries out, 2025 has already started off and I've not addressed anything I thought I was going to address last year, this is the episode for you. So first of all, in terms of setting boundaries, I'm going to give you 5 really practical tips. The first thing is you have to get clear where the boundary is needed. So what I say to you here is actually the first step to setting a boundary is knowing what boundary is needed. And the way to do that is to pay attention to what feels overwhelming or draining right now in your world, whether that's life or business or both, okay? Ask yourself, where do I feel drained? Where do I feel overwhelmed? Where do I feel thinly stretched? Where are you giving more than perhaps you want to? Perhaps you need to, and I'm going to use a word that anyone that knows me knows I hate using, but where are you giving more than you should, inverted commas, she says. So for example, let's try and come up with some simple examples, which I think will probably relate for many. So, and I'm going to try and do life and business here, because even though my work is predominantly business focused, I would say for most of us, our business is a vehicle to our life, whether that's purpose, passion, or profit. It's a vehicle to life, okay? So let's think about where you might be feeling stretched in life. It might be as simple as social commitments. Maybe you say yes to everything. Your diary is literally full, okay? And what you need is a boundary to give yourself some time back. So it might be as simple as, and I say simple, I often say this stuff is simple, not necessarily easy, but the first step might be setting a boundary where you limit your social plans to 1 or 2 evenings a week rather than the 5 or 6 that they currently are. So when you get asked to do something, what you need to think about is, how do I say differently, rather than jumping straight into, yep, I'll be there, which is what I always do. And then I think afterwards, why did I do that? Why did I say that? I don't want to. Actually being able to say to a friend, I'd love to see you, but this week's really busy. Could we put something in for couple of weeks' time? And I'm kind of making this up as I go along, but you get my point, okay? Maybe you need to look at your social commitments in life. Now, from a business perspective, okay, where are you feeling drained in business? Is it actually you love working with your clients, but you feel like you're at their beck and call? Because that's on you, not them. You haven't set a boundary. So if you currently have a bit of a situation where you've created something where clients expect immediate responses at all hours, maybe you need to set a boundary around deciding to respond only in certain hours and communicating that. So get clear where you're feeling drained first. In life, where are you feeling like you're just being stretched too thin, you just can't do it all? And in business, where are you perhaps, I think one of the common ones in business is actually where are you feeling like it's not as much fun as it was? Actually, it might not be that it's not as much fun. It might just be that where there's no boundaries, it's scope creep almost, where you're doing too much. So get clear where you're feeling drained. The second tip I've got for you is to practice saying no without over-explaining. All right. Now, no, God, I'm sure I've done an episode on this, but I'll have a look and I'll drop it in the show notes if I have. If I haven't, we'll pop it on the list. But saying no doesn't have to be a bad thing, and it doesn't have to feel really harsh. You don't have to explain a no, but you also don't have to be rude. You simply need to give the no and maybe communicate your priorities. You do not have to justify anything, but the only way to get better at saying no is to practice. It really is. So let's use some examples here in life, okay? Maybe you've got a particular family member who always just seems to need a lot of support from you. But maybe it is, you've got a family member who asks you to do something for them and you know you don't have the capacity for it. But what you do is you go into over-explaining because you feel bad because they're family. But you can say, I'm just not in a place where I can help with that right now. But I really hope you find someone that can, and I hope you get it all sorted. I didn't even use the word no. In business, it could be, a client asks for a, inverted commas again, quick favour. Could you just help me with this? Now, if that's outside of your scope of work, But generally what you do is you agree to keep the peace. So you say yes rather than no, when inside you're screaming, say no. Again, you don't actually have to say no. You could say, that actually falls outside of our current scope of works. I'm really happy to help you, but I'll need to provide a quote for some extra work, for example. So maybe, again, just think about where you're feeling drained, but then think about, where am I not saying no because I'm trying to keep the peace and it's just easier, when actually it's not easier on you in the long term? And how could I say no without feeling bad and without feeling like it's harsh? How can I say no without saying no? It's a great game to play, by the way, that one. Right, so my third tip is probably one that I should have put at the top of the list, because actually this is about setting boundaries with yourself. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to enforce are the ones that we set with ourselves, but they're also often the ones that make the most difference. Because, and this is where I said, perhaps I should have said this first, arguably, if we can't set boundaries with ourselves, how will we ever set boundaries with others? So I want you to really think about, where do you need to set boundaries with yourself? So for my examples on this one, maybe in life, you have said time and time again that you're going to take weekends off for time with the family and for rest, or you're going to not work in the evenings because that is family time. But you are constantly going back on that and just sneaking in a little bit of work, or opening up the laptop, or constantly find yourself thinking, I need to. How can you hold yourself accountable? How can you absolutely commit to you and hold the boundary for you? Because if you can't hold it for you, you will not hold it for others. So find ways to hold yourself accountable and make that a little bit easier. If you've said you're not going to work, put the laptop away and out of sight. Plan an activity that means you cannot work. Force the hand is a good tactic, by the way, because actually what this is about is showing yourself you can, and it's okay, it's safe, and nothing bad happens. Maybe there's the boundary in business around overbooking your calendar. So you never leave any time for you to stop and think, for you to review the business, for creative thinking for the future of the business. So a simple boundary might be blocking out, a couple of hours once a week, once a month is a good starting point, and treating that as non-negotiable as you would a meeting with someone else. I say this to clients all the time. Book a meeting with yourself, because you'd never cancel a meeting with a client. How often are you cancelling your own meetings with you? Set the boundary with you too. My fourth tip is to use tech and systems to reinforce your boundaries. So I just use that phrase, force your hand. There are systems and technology that can help you with this, and boundaries are much easier to maintain when systems do the heavy lifting. And actually what it does, so a really simple example. I worked with a client, this is going back a couple of years. She really wanted to reduce her working week. Essentially, she wanted to reduce her working week to 4 days. But what she really wanted to do was give herself 1 day a week where she wasn't working in the business. She could choose to not work at all, but if she needed to, she could work on the business. Okay? But she found it really hard. She found it really hard to say no when people would say, well, I can't do any other time that week. Could we just do Friday, for example? Now, this is where tech is great. Okay? So this is a really great business example. She put an out of office on her email that said, I do not work Fridays. And I've done this too, I'm a bugger for it. I will say I only coach on certain days of the week, and then I will let someone book into the other month. So what we did, actually I don't do it anymore because I use a system. We have a booking system for my clients to book their coaching calls, so that I am not on a call with a client saying, okay, yep, I've got time on that day. Yeah, I can make that work. I'm a sod for it. But now they get sent to a booking system which only allows them to book into the times that I've said I want to work. So that's helping me stay really clear on a boundary I want to have, and using a system so that I don't have to say, I'm sorry, I can't do that. Calendar systems are brilliant for life and business, quite frankly. So if you do struggle with the whole social events piece, you could pre-book nights where you are going to allow yourself to do stuff. You can use systems so that clients can only get into where you want to. You can use out of office to manage expectations so you don't have to answer every email immediately. Use systems to reinforce your boundaries. It takes away a lot of the emotion and the fear that we hold on to when it comes to setting boundaries. And my final tip is on all of those things that I've just described, just start small. Setting boundaries can feel really, really overwhelming. But like anything, if it feels too big, it is too big. So start with one small, manageable change and build from there, because it's about showing yourself that it's okay to have the boundary. It's about showing yourself the benefit of having the boundary. Because there will be some people, there's a wonderful quote, isn't there? The only people that have a problem with your boundaries is the people that benefited from you having none. I don't think I've quoted that correctly, but you get my point. There will potentially be people that don't like it when you set a boundary. That doesn't mean you shouldn't. That doesn't mean you shouldn't prioritise you, your needs, your rest, your time, your energy. And again, I'm going to quote other things. Remember the aeroplane model? They tell you to put your oxygen mask on before you help anybody else. That's what boundaries are about. You have to look after you to be able to help anyone else, to look after all the people you look after, to give all that you give. So if setting boundaries feels really overwhelming, don't go out from this episode and go, right, that's it, I'm all over it. I'm not going to go out 5 nights a week. I'm not taking calls after this time. I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. Because forgive me, but you're setting yourself up for failure. Start with one small, manageable change. Work out what is really causing you the most impact right now of not having a boundary. Start there and build your confidence, take courageous action, and build from there. So let's think about some really simple examples. I'm asking like someone's going to answer me immediately. I'm actually just thinking of one that I'm a terror for. I have this thing. So like when I get a WhatsApp message, it's almost like I feel like I've got to respond immediately. Now I think part of that is I'm worried if I don't do it immediately, I'm going to forget. Okay. But equally, I think we live in this world of urgency where we feel obligated that we should answer messages, particularly when they are clients. This is life and business, really quickly, because if we don't, they'll think that we're not doing a good enough job. Now, I work on a different time zone to 50% of my clients. So actually, I've just had to communicate up front that they're not going to hear from me after a certain point in the evening on their time zone. And I'm using technology to help me. So my phone goes on to quiet mode at a certain point so that I don't see notifications. So there's no noise there infiltrating my brain that's already working hard at not responding. So if you are someone that constantly feels obligated, just take one small step. Okay, so the first step I did was actually I put the phone onto do not disturb from a certain point in the evening so I don't see anything until I decide to the following morning. And I took one further small step and I explained to my UK clients who didn't question it at all that I'm 4 hours ahead, so therefore at this time I won't respond to messages. But I also then asked the question of, would you like me to respond first thing the next day? And together we found a solution. Where do you need to start? By setting one small boundary, taking one small action that supports you with the things that you need to. Now, I could talk about boundaries all day long, and there are so many things where we probably need to look at boundaries. In business, it can so often be around the scope of work, setting limits on what's included in our paid for service and what people then ask for over and above. Payment terms, communication channels, timelines, lead times for responses, requests. All these things require boundaries. We live in in a world of urgency. We live in a world of expectation, but that doesn't mean we cannot have boundaries. And when we do, we are better for it. They are better for it. Everyone is better for it. So I want you to really think about, where do you need to work on your boundaries? Just start with one area, one thing where you know that you need to have a slightly better boundary. It doesn't have to be big, it just has to matter to you, because if it doesn't, you won't do it, by the way. Decide where you need to do some work on boundaries. What does the boundary look like? Communicate it and stick to it. You do not have to over-explain. You simply have to do this for you. I promise you'll be amazed at how much lighter, clearer, more focused you feel when you protect your energy and prioritise your needs. I just want to say thank you for listening to this episode today, because maybe this is actually an example of where you have set a boundary for you, where you give yourself something that you need. And if it is, I want you to use this example and remind yourself you can. All too often I hear people say, I am terrible with boundaries. I just can't set boundaries. I'm such a people pleaser. Let go of those labels and just ask yourself, what do you need? What needs to change for you to have that? And take one small step towards it today. Now, if this episode has resonated with you, or you're thinking of someone that maybe needs a little help with their boundaries, share it with them. Share this episode with someone else who needs a reminder that it's okay to have boundaries. It does not make you selfish. It makes you stronger, and it makes you really courageous. And with that, give me a subscribe or hit follow, whatever platform you're on, so that I will jump into your podcast list next week too. But of course, as always, remember, she is courageous and she is you.